Disclaimer: this content is only for mature audiences. Viewer discretion is advised. I was folding laundry that Sunday afternoon, the kind of quiet day when the sun seeps through the curtains just enough to make everything feel soft and slow. My husband had been oddly silent, sitting on the edge of the bed, scrolling through his phone like he was lost in thought. The TV was playing some random background noise, but all I could really hear was the soft swish of fabric in my hands and the occasional sigh from him. Married life has a rhythm, sometimes peaceful, sometimes predictable, but that day, something was different. I had just matched up a pair of socks and was halfway through folding a towel when I felt his eyes on me. Not the usual glance. This one lingered. It was like I could feel the weight of his gaze pressing gently against my back. I turned slightly, catching his eyes. There was a look in them that I hadn't seen in a while, tender, but charged with something else. He smiled, a slow, knowing smile, like he was remembering something only the two of us knew. And without a word, he stood up, walked over, and took the towel from my hands. "Come here," he said, voice low but steady. There was a strange pause between us, the kind that comes not from awkwardness, but from knowing each other too well. I hesitated, not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know what had sparked this shift. Just moments ago, I was sorting laundry by colors, and now he was pulling me closer, into a space where love doesn't need a reason, it just is. He took my hand, warm and firm, and gently led me toward the bedroom. Everything felt like it had slowed down. The air between us changed, thick with unspoken words and the kind of closeness that only builds after years together, through fights, laughter, and ordinary days. I looked up at him, curious, surprised, and maybe even a little shy. It's strange how, even after all this time, he could still make my heart race like the first time we kissed. But just as we reached the edge of the bed, a loud knock echoed from the front door. He froze. I looked at him, eyes wide, heart pounding in a different rhythm now. Who could it be? Why now? And why did he look suddenly concerned? Want to know what happens next? Who was at the door? Was it someone from his past or mine? Could it change everything? Drop your guesses in the comments, and let's make this story interactive. Speech balloon poll. Do you think it's a stranger, a family member, or someone with a secret? Vote now. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss part 2 of this heart-touching romantic story. He didn't move right away. His hand was still holding mine, but the moment had shifted. The knock came again, louder this time, more urgent. I looked at him, hoping for some kind of explanation, but he only shook his head slightly, as if to say, "Stay here." His grip loosened, and he let go of my hand gently, then turned and walked toward the door. I stood frozen at the edge of the bed, heart racing. The peaceful silence that had filled the room earlier was gone. Now, it was replaced by a thick, humming tension. I strained to hear what was happening in the hallway, but all I caught were faint murmurs, low voices that didn't carry far enough to understand. It wasn't like our house had paper-thin walls, no, this was something else. It was the way he was speaking. Careful. Quiet. Like he didn't want me to hear. I bent down and slowly picked up the towel I had dropped when he took my hand earlier. I needed to keep busy. My mind was already spiraling. Who knocks like that on a Sunday afternoon? Family usually calls. Friends don't just show up unannounced. And that look on his face, it wasn't fear exactly. But it was something close. He came back a minute later, but he didn't speak right away. His eyes didn't meet mine, and that silence between us, the one that had felt so intimate earlier, now felt loaded. I wanted to ask who it was. I wanted to demand an answer. But I didn't. Because something in the way he avoided my gaze made me nervous. Like I already knew I wasn't going to like the answer. Finally, I whispered, "Who was it?" He paused for a second too long before saying, "Just someone dropping something off. Nothing important." But his tone didn't match the words. He was too casual. Too quick to change the subject. And I noticed his phone was now tucked in his back pocket, screen down, unusual for him. Normally, he left it face up on the dresser. I couldn't help but wonder if he had gotten a message before the knock. Something that made him act different. Something he wasn't telling me. And just like that, the warmth from earlier felt far away, like something that belonged to a different day. Was he hiding something? Or was I just overthinking? Let me know in the comments what you think is going on. Has this ever happened to you? Something feels off but you can't put your finger on it. The rest of the day moved in slow motion. He tried to act like everything was normal, asking what I wanted for dinner, flipping through the TV channels, even cracking a small joke about a commercial. But none of it felt real. I answered him, smiled where I had to, but inside, I was trying to put pieces together that didn't fit. Every time his phone buzzed, and it did, quietly, a few times, he would check it quickly and put it back in his pocket without a word. That wasn't like him. He usually told me everything, even the boring stuff. Later that evening, while he was in the shower, I walked past the dresser and saw the towel I had folded earlier, still half hanging off the edge. My fingers brushed against the fabric, and I was pulled back to that moment, just hours ago, when he had reached for me. When everything had felt warm and close. Now, there was a small gap between us that neither of us had words for. A kind of emotional silence that sat heavier than any argument. I thought about knocking on the bathroom door, asking again who it was, being direct. But part of me hesitated. What if I pushed too hard? What if he pushed back, or worse, pulled away completely? So instead, I walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and sat at the table. I tried to breathe through the strange knot in my stomach. The next morning, I noticed something new. His keys were missing from the hook by the door. I asked casually, "You going out early today?" He said, "Yeah, just need to run an errand." No eye contact. He left in a rush, barely finishing his coffee. I watched through the window as he got in the car, but instead of heading toward his usual route to work, he turned the other way. I waited 10 minutes, grabbed my own keys, and followed. I didn't have a plan. Just questions. He stopped at a small cafe, not one we usually go to. I parked across the street. A few minutes later, a woman showed up. She didn't touch him. They didn't hug. But they sat close. Too close. They talked like they'd done this before. And once, when she laughed, I saw him smile in a way I hadn't seen in a while. I don't know who she was. I don't even know what they talked about. But I knew enough to know something was going on. When he came home later, I didn't ask. And he didn't tell. But now the silence between us is different. It's not just emotional, it's heavy with secrets. What do you think I should do next? Should I confront him directly, or wait to see how this plays out? Do you think there's more to the story than what I saw? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. What would you do if you were in my place? He came home that night like nothing had happened. The front door creaked softly behind him, and his keys hit the counter like always. I watched from the hallway, hidden in the dim glow of the kitchen light, my heart pounding harder than I wanted it to. He walked past me, dropped his bag in the usual spot, and called out casually, "You want to order something? I'm not in the mood to cook." His voice was calm, too calm. Like he was playing a part he'd already rehearsed. I didn't answer right away. I just stared at him, every part of me trying to read between the lines of his face, his tone, his movements. It was the same man I married, same eyes, same smile, but something felt like it had slipped beneath the surface. A crack he was trying hard to cover. Instead of answering, I walked past him and into the bedroom, pretending to be tired. But my mind was racing. I had to know more. I had to be sure I wasn't imagining things. So later, after he fell asleep with his arm draped across his chest and the soft rhythm of his breathing filling the room, I quietly slipped out of bed and reached for his phone. It was locked. Of course. He had started putting a password on it just a few weeks ago. Work stuff, he had said. But now that excuse felt thinner than ever. I stood there in the low light of the hallway, staring at that black screen like it held every answer I didn't want to hear. The next day, I didn't follow him. I let him leave, kissed him on the cheek like nothing was wrong, then sat on the couch with my coffee, thinking. If I asked him directly, he could lie. If I waited too long, maybe I'd lose the chance to understand what was really happening. So I called someone. A friend of his. Someone who usually knew where he was during the day. The tone in his voice when I asked was hesitant. He said, "I thought he was working from home today." That was it. No long explanation. Just enough for the truth to start unraveling. I didn't tell him I'd seen the woman. I didn't say that I'd already felt the shift in our marriage long before this moment. I just sat there quietly after the call, watching the laundry basket across the room, still full from the day everything changed. And then, just as I was about to grab my keys and go searching for answers, his phone buzzed on the table. He had forgotten it. I stared at it. A message preview flashed on the screen. It was from her. No name, just a number. And 4 words that made my chest tighten. "Are we still meeting?" What do you think I saw next? Should I open the message? Should I call the number? Or should I wait for him to come home and see what he says? Tell me in the comments, what would you do if you found your partner hiding messages like this? My hands were shaking, but I picked up the phone. That message still glowing on the screen, almost daring me to unlock it. "Are we still meeting?" 4 simple words, but they hit harder than anything I could have imagined. My thumb hovered over the screen, but I didn't open it. Not yet. Something in me said to wait, to watch, to let him be the one to explain. Maybe it wasn't what I thought. Maybe. But my gut said otherwise. I sat there, frozen in place, and then I noticed something else. A second message. Just a few seconds later. This one was even worse. "She doesn't suspect, right?" It felt like the air left the room. I stood up, phone still in my hand, pacing in small circles. My heart was pounding so loud I could barely think. I didn't know if I should scream, cry, or just walk out. But before I could decide what to do next, the front door opened. He was home. I quickly placed the phone back on the table, just in time. He walked in carrying a brown paper bag, acting casual, smiling like he hadn't left behind a storm inside his own house. "I grabbed your favorite," he said, holding up the bag. "Thought we could have an easy night." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. I couldn't blow up now. I needed to know more. Who was this woman? How long had it been going on? Was it physical, or something even more complicated, emotional? But then, just as I was about to ask anything, the doorbell rang. Again. He froze. So did I. He looked at me, then at the door, and I saw that same flash of tension in his eyes from before. He slowly walked toward it. Opened it. And standing there wasn't the woman. It was her daughter. A teenage girl. Maybe 15, maybe 16. Her eyes wide, nervous. Her voice barely above a whisper when she said, "I need to talk to you." "Dad." The floor might as well have dropped from under me. What do you think this means? Is he hiding a secret family? Did he ever plan to tell me the truth? What would you do if this happened at your door? Drop your theories in the comments. I need to know, would you stay and ask for the full story, or leave right then and there? He didn't move. Just stood there at the open door, staring at her like the air had been knocked out of him. I couldn't breathe. His daughter. How? He had never once mentioned a child. Not in all these years. The girl looked just as nervous, her eyes darting between us. "I didn't know where else to go," she said quietly. "Mom said you might not want to see me, but I had to try." I stepped out from behind him, heart racing, questions flooding my mind. "Who is she?" I asked, my voice cracking. He turned slowly, face pale, eyes full of something I'd never seen in him before, shame. "Her name is Maya," he said. "She's from before us." I didn't know about her. Not until a few months ago. Everything stopped. The phone. The messages. The woman at the cafe. It wasn't an affair, it was her mother. And those messages weren't about sneaking around romantically. They were about planning how to introduce Maya into his life, and maybe mine. He hadn't cheated. He'd been trying to protect me from something he didn't know how to explain. But the damage had already been done. The lies. The silence. The growing distance. I looked at Maya, nervous, but hopeful. Then back at him. "Why didn't you tell me?" I whispered. He stepped forward, gently, like he was trying not to shatter what little trust remained. "Because I was afraid. Afraid you'd leave. Afraid of what it would mean for us." I didn't know what to say. My heart was still aching, but part of me felt something new, relief. It was complicated, yes, but at least now the shadows had names. We brought Maya inside. Talked. Cried. There were still 1,000 questions, but the truth was finally out. And just when I thought I had processed it all, she pulled a folded note from her backpack. "Mom asked me to give you this," she said, handing it to me. I opened it, expecting something simple. But it was a letter. Not to me. To him. And the final line read, "I never told her the full story. But now that she's found you, I have to." So now I'm left wondering, what part of the truth are we still missing? Let me know in the comments. Do you think he's still hiding something? I sat at the edge of the bed that night, holding the letter in both hands. Maya had gone to sleep in the guest room. My husband sat across from me, silent, waiting. The words in the letter kept echoing in my head. Her mother hadn't told him everything. There was still more, something about their past, something I hadn't expected. The truth came slowly, through tired voices and late-night honesty. They had been together briefly, years ago, before we even met. She had never told him she was pregnant. She'd made that choice on her own, raising Maya quietly, out of pride or fear, maybe both. He hadn't lied to me about that. He really hadn't known. But once he found out a few months ago, he was overwhelmed. Shocked. And scared. Not of being a father, but of losing the life we had built together. He explained how the woman had reached out, asking for help. Not money, but a connection for Maya. That's who he had met at the cafe. That's what the messages were about. And yet, even with the best intentions, he'd kept me in the dark. He thought he was protecting me, but it had nearly broken us. I looked at him, tired but finally understanding. "I wish you would have trusted me," I said quietly. "I wish I didn't have to find out like this." "I know," he said. "I was wrong. And I'm sorry. But I want to make this right, with you. With her." The next morning, we sat down as a family, 3 people trying to figure out how to fit into each other's lives. It wasn't perfect. But it was real. Over the next few weeks, things slowly shifted. Maya started opening up. I found myself asking about her school, her favorite music, her dreams. And somewhere between dinner conversations and quiet walks, we began to find common ground. Not as a replacement family, but something new, something growing. Life didn't go back to the way it was. It changed. And sometimes, change is hard. But sometimes, it's exactly what you need. So now I ask you, what would you have done? Could you forgive a secret like that? And do you believe people deserve a second chance? Comment below and tell me how you feel about the ending. Would you want to see where this new chapter leads?